Imagine this. You get home from work or school, you finish doing your tasks like homework, making dinner, maybe you go for a workout and now it's 9 p.m. You're not tired, so you might as well reward yourself for such a productive day with a stroll on the Rift. A trip through the top lane. One Aatrox game never hurt anybody. So you get in game, and unfortunately, you had the fate of first picking top lane. So the opposing top laner went Tryndamere with Ignite, because Grievous wounds, am I right? It's annoying, but not as bad as Vayne, you know, the late game champion, who can also run you down the entire early game for some reason.
It's just nice to win one.
You outplay the Tryndamere and get a lead, but the rest of your team does so poorly that you have to help them, and by now, Tryndamere hits his spike and you're helpless. You put up a good fight, but lose the game. It's 9:40 now, but you can't end on a loss. It wouldn't feel right to sleep with less LP than you started the day with. At least stay even so you can progress the next day. So you get back in there, another game. Hopefully this time you win the coin flip and get second pick. The cycle rinses and repeats, and eventually it's 1 in the morning and you've lost 6 ranked games in a row. Your post-league clarity washes over you in an awesome wave.
I have sinned against you, my Lord. And I would ask that your precious blood would wash and cleanse every stain until it is in the seas of God's forgetfulness.
You tell yourself this is it. You're done wasting your time. You're gonna make a man out of yourself and pull your family out of the rat race. You'll get your parents the nicest house money can buy. You'll pay off your siblings' debts and give them the life you always wanted for yourself. But then the next day comes and you go back to your old ways.
Medicine. Medicine is what it is. Bona fide cure-all. Depression, stress, remorse, failure, it wipes it all away. The mind is a blackboard, and this is the eraser.
You have no idea how many people that's killing. You have no idea. I see people everywhere, all over the world. They're so demoralized, especially young people with a conscience.
That was me for a period of my life. I was addicted to video games, and it wasn't always League. I just used that example since I figured it would be the most relatable. The games I've spent the most time playing are Rust and League of Legends, but for this video, I want to talk about any game that has no endpoint and constantly demands your time to keep up. These games are fun, there is no doubt about that, but they can become a problem, especially when you become addicted, which these games have a natural tendency of doing. Now, I'm not blaming the game devs for my prior addiction. The fault there was totally mine. But I want to examine addictive video games and give advice to anyone who is struggling with it or just discuss the topic in general. But let's be real. When it comes to addictive video games, there seems to be a profile for which games are usually the most common offenders. Before we get into the dangers of being addicted to these games, I want to make an important distinction between what I classify as non-addictive games versus addictive games. Non-addictive games have an endpoint. They are not designed for you to play them forever. Single-player games that have a story fall into this category since once the story is finished, your time with the game is done. You can go back and replay it, but the games are not really designed to be replayed hundreds of times. Instead, the developers want you to enjoy your time with the game, and then you can move on to something else. Addictive games, on the other hand, are usually addictive since there is no defined end goal. Rather, you have a series of endless tasks to keep up your progression, and this progression is never ending. In a single player game, you can 100% the game and be done with it, but in games without any defined endpoints, it's impossible to complete them. Now, I don't think the overwhelming majority of developers design these games to be addicting, but it's just a natural byproduct of their games that we have to be careful of. And I want to make it abundantly clear, I am not pointing any blame towards developers in this video. I'm just trying to highlight the dangers we as consumers should be aware of. I think a helpful analogy to illustrate addictive versus non-addictive games would be to think of a game like Dishonored to be the equivalent of a cinematic masterpiece like Apocalypse Now, and then a small indie game, one that shall not be named, would be like TikTok. One can be carefully examined and studied and expresses true art, whereas the other is endless brain rot and is meant to primarily function as a business. So what makes these games dangerous? For me, it's the fact that you can easily lose track of time while playing them. These games are as close to a real-life equivalent to a hyperbolic time chamber that you'll get in real life. Except instead of coming out shredded and disciplined, you come out lethargic and cosplaying Gragas IRL. Now I know people are going to say that there are other things that are easy to burn your time with, like shows or TikTok, Reels, and YouTube Shorts that are just complete brain rot, and I agree those can be dangerous too. But from my experience, the easiest way I have ever lost track of time was playing Rust or even going on a ranked spree on League of Legends. If you told me I was going to be locked in a room for a year and I could only bring one thing to entertain myself, the options being TikTok, Netflix, or Rust, it's not even close, and I believe anyone who has played Rust would probably feel the same. And I'm saying this as a guy whose passion is movies and wants to work in film someday, so that should illustrate how easily video games can sink you in. There is brain rot in social media, TV shows, movies, and the same is true for video games, or as I like to call them, Vidya. Now before I get to the scariest parts of video game addiction, I want to talk a bit more about my story with video games and why I enjoyed them so much. Like I mentioned before, I primarily played Rust and League, but I believe these reasons can apply to any addictive game. I logged over 3,000 hours on Rust, and it was the only game I played for years, starting when I was 13 years old.
Don't let me leave, Murph. Don't let me leave, Murph. No! No! No!
I'm not gonna explain in depth the Rust cycle and how it reels you in. I want to save that for another video, but I will admit, Rust was incredibly fun, as addicting games usually are. It really was a gigantic sandbox game where you got to interact with real people instead of NPCs, and I made some friendships that lasted for a while on that game. There was so much grind and pressure in the game that you lived for the moments where you got your hands on awesome loot or finally raided that base of roof campers who were trash talking you. The game's highs kept you hooked, and those intense moments where everything was on the line, all of those hours of hard work you had put into the server, and it came down to this one raid, and after you succeeded and those hours were worth it, you wanted to feel that intensity, relief, and reward again. Rust was a dopamine machine. And these things I'm saying about Rust could be applied to many other games. The other thing was in Rust, you could always be doing something to get ahead. If you're not PvPing, you could be farming. If you're not farming, you could be fortifying your base. If you're not fortifying your base, you could be looking for an airdrop or going to a monument. There is always something to do. This consumed you into the game, and the running gag is Rust is like a full-time job, and it basically is. And upkeep, while a justified concept, definitely adds to the list of daily chores a Rust player has to do. I remember the nighttime was the only point in the game where I would feel like taking a break since it was too dark to do anything. But back in those days, and if you're a veteran you'll remember this, you could mess with your GPU to turn on night vision. They patched that, probably after Face Punch got too many calls from wives and mothers complaining about the game consuming their loved ones, and nighttime became a bathroom break or a time to eat. But it's just crazy how much time I would spend on Rust now I look back at it as an adult. You would do this the entire wipe, and once the wipe would hit, then you would just be back at it again. Wipe Hype Wednesdays and Throw Away the Homework Thursdays were a real thing, and that was a lifestyle I lived ashamedly for too long.
Hey guys, it's Boy. If you don't know me, I've been playing League of Legends as a pro player since Season 1, a streamer for the last 5 years. League of Legends has basically been my life for the last decade. It's been what I think about all the time, play all day, make content with, play in pro matches. I've been live, breathe, and thinking, eating League of Legends since since I was in high school, and now 10 years later, it's everything I love.
Give you more gold! They give you more gold than...
Are you fucking serious?
There has been an FBI investigation into me.
Remember the day you almost caught T1! Thresh!
Hey, little girl, what are you doing here alone? I'm stuck in low elo forever.
I've also made a lot of other creepy and big mistakes.
Oh my god, you just made Nolo! You can't escape the guy first timing Rise ADC when your team is full AP! Can't escape that, can't run! It's the guy! It sucks playing the shit! I'm fucking addicted! So I can't quit!
League. Where do I even begin? Compared to Rust, League of Legends is a different beast, since that is a match-based game where there is an endpoint, since the goal is to break the enemy's nexus. League was fun like Rust, but it seems like the real reason I was hooked was since there was this competitive aspect to the game. Me and my friends would always have competitions as to who could reach gold first, then plat, and we never got good enough for diamond, but it was always an endless goal to grind higher and higher. There are some people who can set a ranked goal, accomplish it, and never touch the game again, but that is a small portion of people. In those days, League was the competitive activity I had with my friends, and we would play draft games and clash tournaments together. Those were fun but occasional, and we were still playing the game somewhat competitively most of the time. The same story unfolded with other games like Overwatch and CSGO, but speaking for me personally, League was the game that most of us were infatuated with. When COVID happened, it seemed like a perfect storm to just spam ranked games, and I remember playing 8, 10, sometimes even 12 ranked games a day, which is bad, but somehow not even close to Big Tonka T. I was so obsessed with my rank and climbing at one point that losing a ranked game or ending with less LP than I started the day with would completely ruin my day. And with these bot lanes, man, good luck winning a game. Hey, what do my bot lane and Black Bishop have in common? They both run it down.
Every single day.
It was bad, and looking back, I wonder why my teenage brain was obsessed with this stupid rank that I would never even bring up in a real-life conversation. But I guess as you get older and mature, your priorities change. I want to move on to the scariest part of this video game addiction, and that is the loss of time. I talked about how you can lose track of time, but those years of playing Rust and League are now a blur in my mind. I spent so much time on each game, but I barely have any memories now that I look back. It's crazy to think about since I can only remember a handful of matches from League and a few moments from Rust, but not nearly enough memories to match the time I put into those games. Compare this to a single-player story game where I can remember each level. For example, Silent Hill 2, no spoilers here. I can remember going through the apartment buildings and my feelings entering each room, and the same can be said for the hospital and every other level in the game. The same goes for any other single-player game, but I can't remember the same amount of stuff from Rust. Not nearly enough to match the amount of hours I have in the game. One of my hobbies is playing tennis, and I can remember a good chunk of tennis sessions I've had throughout the years. But when it comes to gaming, specifically the addictive games, it feels like a portion of time that's just been lost. To the people who have thousands of hours in a game, how many memories of that game do you actually have? And compare that to anything else, like school or hanging out with your friends. This is the scariest part about addictive games, in my opinion. The fact that you can just burn your time if you don't bother to monitor yourself. Those adventurous years of your life, those memories you will make and tell your kids about, can be totally non-existent if you waste your time and you can cheat yourself out of your full potential. Another thing that really urged me to get away from my addiction was just being a producer rather than a consumer. I realized that I wanted to be someone who creates, rather than someone who constantly takes. Don't get me wrong, it's fun and necessary to indulge from time to time, but doing it constantly, that is where it becomes a problem. That's actually a huge reason why I started this channel, because I wanted to work on something bigger than just myself. I know some people are not ambitious, and they don't really care about having to do more than what's necessary, like working their 9 to 5 and sleeping, and they want that spare time to just relax and keep to themselves. And to those people, more power to you. That creates less competition for the people that actually want to set themselves apart and do something more with their lives. But what kind of a life is that? It might sound morbid, but all of us are going to die.
You're gonna be dust one day. No!
And it'll come just like that. Time flies, as the saying goes. And when your time comes, what do you want to be remembered for? Once you really think about that, and that this is your only chance, then that motivates you to be something more. There is an amazing quote from a philosopher that I think can really hammer this point in. John Stuart Mill says, "It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. And if the fool or the pig are of a different opinion, it is because they only know their own side of the question. It's better to suffer as a man in pursuit of greatness, rather to indulge in what's convenient and that can satisfy your desires in the short term." Now, some people might disagree, but when it comes to knowing which side is better, then we have to ask the man who has lived both. For example, if we wanted to know if it's better to be an alcoholic or to live a sober life, then we should ask the man who has lived both. And when it comes to these situations, in this case, gaming or doing something more productive with your time, then I guarantee the more disciplined side that leads to a more meaningful life will always win. I can attest to a gaming addiction and being free of it since I have lived both lives. I have spent my free time playing video games, and I have spent my free time working on projects and doing things that are more meaningful. And I can tell you from experience, it's much more fulfilling to do the latter, even if it is more difficult. I guess what it comes down to, and this is a quote I heard a while back, when you don't have purpose, you will distract yourself with pleasure. This goes for any addiction, but some people only want pleasure. And if that is what you want, fine. But don't act like hedonism is a good thing. The difference between a man and an animal is his ability to suppress his desires. If you just want to give in, like I have done in the past, then you're no different than an animal. So what do you want to be? That decision lies in your hands. But that's just my take on gaming and how it can easily become a vice for many. If you're struggling with this addiction like I did in the past, then I recommend to take a step back and to really evaluate where this path will take you in your life, and to realize that you are in the driver's seat and have control over this. You can choose to stop and do something greater, and the only thing stopping you is yourself. With this being the summer, the season where I would spend the most time gaming since school was out, I wanted to make this video since I thought the timing was appropriate. You can end this summer being the same as you entered it, without having made any real developments because you spent the entire time relaxing. Or you can choose to venture out of your comfort zone and try something new and something that will make you grow. The choice is yours. I hope this video didn't come across as too preachy. I know self-improvement has kind of become a meme, with the red pill armchair gurus on their podcasts with sunglasses on while indoors, but I wanted to give a genuine take on an addiction I have suffered from, and an addiction that I think goes under the radar compared to the usual culprits of drugs and pornography. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors, regardless of if you decide to listen to my advice. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.